This is Beth from the West Allis Public Library, and welcome to another episode of our Let's Go on Vacation book club, where this week we are traveling to the Bermuda Triangle. This is episode 2, and we are reading Where is the Bermuda Triangle by Megan Stein. Today we are on chapter 2, Lost at Sea. As the years went by, many ships were lost in the Bermuda Triangle. In 1880, a huge ship called the Atalanta sailed from Bermuda toward England. On board were 290 men, officers and young cadets. The ship never reached England, and none of the men were ever seen again. The very next year, an even stranger thing happened. A ship called the Ellen Austin was sailing in the Atlantic north of the Sargasso Sea. All of a sudden, someone on board spotted a derelict, a ghost ship. Derelict is the word for ships that are found drifting upright on the ocean with no one on board. What had happened? Did it fall under the spell of some unknown force in that part of the ocean? The captain of the Ellen Austin watched the ghost ship drifting for 2 days. He wanted to make sure it was really abandoned. He didn't want to walk into a trap set by pirates. Finally, he decided it was safe. He sent some of his own men in a small rowboat to check out the drifting ship. When they boarded the ghost ship, they found that the ship's log was missing and the name had been removed from the bow, the front of the ship. Other than that, though, it was in good condition, fully stocked with food. So the captain ordered his men to sail the abandoned ship back to New York, staying close to the Ellen Austin along the way. In those days, if someone found an abandoned ship, there was reward money for bringing it back to the nearest port. But the Ellen Austin and the ghost ship got separated by bad weather, fog, and strong winds. A few days later, the captain finally spotted the derelict again, but it was drifting crazily, and there was no one on board. His own men, the second crew, had vanished completely. As time went by, more unexplained things occurred in or near the Bermuda Triangle. In 1909, one of the world's greatest sailors was a man named Joshua Slocum. He was famous for being the first man to sail alone all the way around the world. On his journeys, he had survived huge storms, attacks by pirates, and worse. But he disappeared completely on a simple solo trip that led him straight through the Bermuda Triangle. And then, in 1918, a huge U.S. Navy ship called the Cyclops disappeared without ever sending a single SOS. In those days, an SOS signal would be sent in Morse code whenever a ship or boat was in trouble on the seas. The Cyclops had a radio. The crew could have called for help. Why didn't they? There were 309 men on board, and all vanished. It was the largest Navy ship ever lost without a trace. It had been sailing from Barbados in the West Indies toward Chesapeake Bay. The route took it right through the heart of the Bermuda Triangle. The Cyclops wasn't the last ship to run into strange troubles in those dangerous waters. Only a few years later, another ghost ship was found adrift. And this time, the story was filled with so many twists and turns, it could have been a spy movie. Chapter 3, Another Ghost Ship. 3 years after the Cyclops disappeared, another strange and mysterious event occurred in the Bermuda Triangle. A large 5-masted ship called Carroll A. Deering was spotted stuck on a sandbar off the coast of North Carolina. No humans were on board, but a meal was still cooking on the stove. Most of the captain's and crew's things were missing: clothes, luggage, a heavy trunk. 2 cats seemed to have run the place. Had the captain and crew climbed into lifeboats trying to escape during a storm? If so, how could they have taken all those heavy bags with them? Or had something weirder happened? All sorts of possibilities were put forth in the newspapers. Maybe there was a mutiny on board. A mutiny is when the crew of a ship rebels against the captain and takes over. Maybe the crew killed the captain and then rowed ashore in small boats. Other people thought pirates had come aboard and taken over. There was very little, however, to back up most of these ideas. Then, in June 1921, the New York Times reported that a message had been found in a bottle on the shore in North Carolina. The message appeared to have been written by one of the crew members. It said the ship had been taken over and the crew had been put in leg irons. The captain's wife hired a handwriting expert to look at the message. She wanted to know who had written it. For a while, she was convinced it had been written by Henry Bates, one of the crew members on her husband's ship. Later, though, the man who discovered the message in the bottle admitted that it was a hoax or a trick. Finally, the New York Police Department said maybe Russians were to blame. The police had heard stories about a Russian scheme. According to the stories, groups of Russians living in America would get themselves hired as sailors on a ship. Once at sea, they would mutiny. Then they'd sail the ship to a Russian port. Maybe Russians took over the ship and then had to abandon it during bad weather. Years later, though, some people began to suspect another reason. They thought the Carol A. Deering had been a victim of the Bermuda Triangle. As time went by, the list of ships that had gone missing in the Bermuda Triangle kept piling up. In 1941, 2 more huge Navy ships disappeared. They were sister ships to the Cyclops. They had been sailing through the Triangle on a trip north to Portland, Maine. A few years later, a ship called the Rubicon was found drifting off the coast of Florida with only a dog on board. What had happened to the captain? And why were his clothes still there? In 1952, a writer named George X. Sand wrote an article about all the disappearances in the Atlantic Ocean. The article was printed in Fate magazine, a magazine that printed stories about ghosts and UFOs and other weird legends and mysteries. Sand described the triangular area of water where boats, ships, and planes seemed to disappear without a trace. But he didn't invent the name Bermuda Triangle. The name was invented by another writer, Vincent Gaddis, in 1964. He wrote a cover story about the mysterious Bermuda Triangle for a magazine called Argosy. 10 years later, a writer named Charles Berlitz wrote a best-selling book that made the Bermuda Triangle a popular topic all over the world. Some people thought the idea of a Bermuda Triangle was silly. They said it was easy to explain why boats would sink or vanish in the ocean. The ocean is huge. At times it is filled with enormous, powerful waves that roll and swirl. Of course, huge waves can swallow up smaller boats or cause big ships to turn over. But what about the planes? How could anyone explain all the planes that had disappeared over the same triangular spot on the map? And that's the end of chapter 3. We'll pick up with chapter 4 tomorrow. So tomorrow at 7 o'clock, join us for episode 3 of Let's Go on Vacation in the Bermuda Triangle. Until then, bye.